step back, puts up the three, got hit, shot's good, and one! James Harden double team, and a chance for a 4-point play.
Okay, welcome back to the DC pod. I am Christian, joined as always by Dallas diehard Darcy, where we cover all things basketball. First question, Darcy, have you ever rolled your ankle on a ref?
Not on a ref. It's definitely an odd thing to happen for sure. Yeah. I think I've done it once with a spectator at a practice when they were a little bit too close to the sideline, but nothing that required MRI. It's terrible luck for Trae Young.
Yeah, well, you always kind of think in the past where you used to see whether it be cameramen or whatever on the baseline, that they were just way too close in terms of, for player safety and how many injuries or how many times players would freaking smack their head on cameras or run into people. So it's definitely a first that it's happened on the sideline. I mean, you see stuff with sometimes fans and whatnot with those courtside seats, but that could be one of the weirdest things. And I saw a funny tweet from someone saying, how's LeBron going to be able to blame this injury on the schedule? So, but I suppose there was quite a few injuries this season when you look at it, and you can only really relate it to the short break they had between seasons. So he does have a point there, but I'm sure if AD and he were in the finals or getting ready to go to the finals, there wouldn't be too much complaining. So we will get started by cracking on with the conference finals game. So the last time we did a pod was actually before either series had started. We had both called Milwaukee. I think you had them in a sweep. I had them in 5. And then we both had the Clippers in 7 for that Western Conference battle. So considering it was the game that happened yesterday, Atlanta-Milwaukee, how do you sum up that series? Is it what you thought? Is there anything that stood out to you? What do you make of that Eastern Conference Finals, Stars?
Well, I think if you look at the first 3 games, probably the most interesting and the most noteworthy game was the first one, and the way that Trae Young kind of single-handedly was able to defeat Milwaukee, even on a night where they played, really well. Yeah, he was absolutely fantastic, for them to grind out a 116 to 113 point victory behind 48 points and 11 assists from Trae Young. It's a kind of performance that is just so memorable, and that's the 3rd round in a row where he has really put on something absolutely memorable and fantastic for that team. Shot 50%, hit 4 threes, only turned over 6 times. So that single-handedly, that game was exceptional, and the performance that he put out, along with Capella and John Collins, was awesome in that first game as well. I think Atlanta basically got a perfect performance from their unit in game 1. They got everything they needed. Collins was huge, 23 and 15. Capella grabbed them a double-double with 19 boards. They got double figures from Huerta, almost double figures from Gallinari off the bench as well. And obviously Trae Young with the monster performance was too much for Middleton and Giannis and Holiday. But after that game 1, one thing that concerned me after that game 1 was, they only won that game by 3 in the clutch. What happens if, they lose that game? Where do Atlanta go from there? How much better can Atlanta be than, what we saw from them in that game 1? And, that's basically what leads into their performance in game 2 was they got absolutely smoked. It looked like Trae Young was shooting a lot of 3-pointers and Milwaukee were running out and getting uncontested layups. Watching that game 2, it kind of felt like the series was all leading Milwaukee's way from then on.
Yeah, well, it's very funny. So game 1, right, as you just mentioned, it's now it was the 3rd series in a row. So Atlanta won game 1 in New York, they won game 1 in Philly, and then they win game 1 in Milwaukee. So I don't know what the correlation between Thibodeau, Doc Rivers, and Bud was in terms of just whether it's not having their guys ready or just getting punched in the mouth by McMillan. And I can't believe it happened 3 times in a row that all those teams that Atlanta faced seems like they weren't ready, or they were surprised by what the Hawks were giving them. And they all seem to pretty much do that drop coverage off the pick and roll and seem to just give Trae Young his dose of floaters. So just obviously me not being an NBA coach, I would probably think you'd want Trae Young to settle for outside jumpers and not let him get to that sweet spot where he seems to, I struggle to think where he misses a floater. He seems to be one of the best in the league at it already. So that to me was interesting. And then with game one, obviously you got nothing out of Middleton. So that sucked from that side of things. So I think he had 15 points, but only shot something like 26% from the field. So that's a really accurate thing to sort of build off in terms of the game two. It was kind of like, gee, Atlanta only won by 3. If that's what we can hope for as being sort of a best case scenario, what does that sort of lead to for the rest of the series? And it feels very much like how things went with Miami. With that Miami forcing him to Milwaukee to OT in that game one, and the second game, Milwaukee just smoked him, right? Won by 40 or 50. I think they put up nearly 50 points in the first quarter. So some similarities between obviously Atlanta and their first 2 series, and then Milwaukee with their first series in particular. And then game 3 yesterday was the big one, right? So it was kind of a back and forth game. You liked the response and energy to start the game out of Atlanta. And then what did it come down to in the end? Probably just Middleton and the Hawks getting unfortunate with Trae, because they were leading when Trae, I think, left when he rolled his ankle.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure they were in the lead anyway. If they weren't, it was very close. So that probably changed.
It certainly sucked the momentum out of the game. That was the thing, because it felt like it was a really tough game that could have gone either way. And like you said, Atlanta were right in it for the fight, particularly behind Young's really good game and behind a good game from Gallinari. Gallinari really had to go in offensively. So that was keeping them right in the fold. But you're right, when, Young grimaced after the rolled ankle, and then the whole team kind of looked around at each other for a second going, if he can't go, what do we do? Like, how do we close this game out against this juggernaut team? And I suppose it's just that little element of doubt that seeped into their mind that gave Milwaukee and in particular the opportunity to come out and take a stranglehold on the game in the series. And Middleton did that. The way that he was able to attack in the mid range and make back-to-back contested jump shots, it's deflating for the defense. It's I'm going to get to my spot and I'm going to knock it down. And the way that he did it was 20 points in the fourth quarter. He really, really took control of the game. And you look at his overall stat line, Middleton, it's something special. We talk often on this pod about how part of his game that's underrated is how efficient he is, especially when he gets it going. When he gets it going like this, 38 points, 11 rebounds, and 7 assists, 15 to 26 from the field, 6 to 12 from deep, made all his free throws for an overall plus 16. So he was basically as efficient as you could possibly want. And, if you're Milwaukee and you're getting a dominant game dominant performance from Giannis, which we have seen in all 3 games, if you're complementing it with what Middleton did in that game 3, you're going to be extremely tough to beat. I think Atlanta really struggled to compete with them. Especially there's a couple of key guys who couldn't get it going for Atlanta and couldn't keep them competing in this one. And I thought Collins, he played well, but foul trouble cost him big time. He lost momentum in his game because of the way that he had to go to the bench at critical moments. And they tried their best to get Bogdanovic going, but it's clear to me that the knee is bothering him and he's not in a good rhythm, and he doesn't feel confident to play the game out hard. 3 for 16, that's as bad a shooting performance we've seen as him basically the whole season.
Yeah. Well, you sort of saw it in that game 7, right? If with Philly and Atlanta, if they didn't get the Herder game, you're not really sure how they get the points otherwise. So, it would have been really nice to have Bogdan healthy and going, because a lot of the times we saw during the back end of the season, he would be that primary playmaker when Trae was off the court. So everything would kind of run through him. So it definitely disrupted the flow. I think that's clear as day. And I'm not sure if you're in that situation and, in your Nate McMillan, and I know John Collins had 4 or 5 fouls, whatever, do you just put him in because you need something? I don't think Capella even played in the fourth quarter of yesterday's game. I'm pretty sure he only ended up with 28 minutes, 27 minutes. Like he played okay in the minutes he was, but he didn't see the court at all in the fourth. So given the Trey situation and how that kind of sucked the sort of life out of the State Farm Arena, as you said, what's the harm in throwing John Collins back out there?
I think you're right. I think, if he can stay on the floor and give them some minutes at the 5 spot, that's pretty key. I know that they seems like McMillan loves that lineup of Capella, Collins, and Gallinari, and I think as much as that might not be as effective against Milwaukee, it seems, just because of just how fast their front court is with Giannis just becoming such a matchup problem. But I'd be interested if he really throws some caution in the wind in the next game and try a few more minutes for a guy like Okongwu, because I'd like what I've seen from him on the court. His athletic feel for the game that could allow Collins to still play the 4 spot when Capella's off the floor. And I think if they're able to unlock a 20, 25 point offensive performance from Collins, that could really help them steal another game.
Yeah, and the funny thing, sort of looking ahead to the offseason, is Collins is, he's a restricted free agent. So he didn't sign his rookie extension during the season when a lot of people did. I'm not sure if he even got an offer or he just declined to.
He got lowballed.
Okay.
He got lowballed for sure. He was, he probably thinks he's worth anywhere from, $20 to $25 million a season potentially. And I think he's probably shown his worth there. I think Atlanta really got to make sure they lock him down.
Yeah, I think he actually works well with Trey. So it'd be interesting to see where sort of Atlanta go from here, because they're kind of beyond the looming Trey extension in a couple of years' time or a year's time. They're kind of locked into who they've got. They've got Capella signed. They've got Bogdanović obviously just signed away. They need to now sign Collins. They probably have Herder coming up soon. There's a few things that, and look, this team probably could be, given the small sample we've seen of only, effectively half a season of McMillan as coach and some really nice emergence from Herder. If I know a lot of people have been high on him in the past, but did many people think he'd drop 26 in a game 7 in Philly? So there's a lot to like about the group they have. I know Reddish came back for a little bit in that game 2, played some of that garbage time in the 40-point loss. And I'm not sure he played much yesterday, if at all, but there is a lot of things to like. And obviously Hunter being injured, that would have changed a lot for them this series. So it definitely feels like they're low on troops, doesn't it? Like Atlanta have done freaking so well to even win a game in this series, because they don't really have a good matchup for Giannis, do they? It seems like if Giannis wanted to, he could have, 40 plus a night easily. So I think credit to them. They've done bloody well.
You're absolutely right. When you're leaning on Gallinari for 36 minutes and Solomon Hill for 15, like, this is the conference finals. Like, those guys shouldn't be hitting the court with that kind of frequency. Obviously, Gallo's a little bit better than Hill, but still, when you're talking about Giannis, who's not coming off the floor at all for any reason, and he's one of the toughest matchups in the league, they're definitely undermanned for sure.
Yeah. So do you expect Milwaukee to take care of game 4? I think it's tomorrow, and then win game 5 and close the series out? Or do you think Atlanta have one last bit of fight left in them?
I think if Trae Young is playing in this game, they have a good chance in game 4 of getting one more. I think this is a big one. This is probably their last chance. If Trae tries to play and it doesn't look good and he can't play to his best ability and then he has to come off, then I think that'll be it. Or if he doesn't play at all, then I think they're in big trouble. Even if they do get this one game, it'll be the last one, I think, whether it's Bucks closing out in the next 2 games, or if Atlanta win, then Milwaukee will win the next 2 after that, I think. Yeah, Bucks have got this under control, and I just don't see a road for the Hawks. I don't really see it. Yeah,
same. So I think they close it out in 5. If I don't know what a day's break would make for Trey's ankle, but I know he did say in the post game that it's really sore and it's frustrating. He said it was bothering him. So anyone who watched sort of when he came back yesterday, he was okay, but clearly limited. I mean, he couldn't really be his normal self. I think he had a wide open 3 from the corner. He was able to step past the guy and step a little bit towards the wing and had a wide open look and still missed it. So normally he's a guy that does a really good job at punishing the defense for giving him any sort of airspace. So, yeah, I think we can. I'm pretty sure. I don't want to say permanent marker in Milwaukee in the finals, but I think we can definitely pencil them in. I think the last probably thing to mention with the Bucks is it's a credit to Giannis and Middleton in particular that they've showed up really throughout the playoffs when the teams most needed them. If you want to go back to game 3 against, Brooklyn in effectively the do or die game, they both combined for 80% of the team's points. They both had, 65 plus. Then they obviously balled out to win the crucial game 6 back at home and force a game 7. And then they both played well enough anyway in game 7 to lead the series. So I know a lot of slander has been thrown towards the Bucks in the past, but Giannis has been super consistent the whole playoffs. While he might not have had that, Giannis game where he's 40, 15, and 10, he's still been great. I think he's averaging 30 points for the playoffs, something like 12 rebounds and then 5 assists. So it's about as good as you could ask if you want someone that's going to show up for you every night. Like, what more do you want?
Seriously, a guy with holes in his game, but he's putting up those kind of numbers. It's pretty fancy. One thing I like about Milwaukee in this series and what I've seen is Bobby Portis. He's really emerged as this matchup suits him for sure. He's proving that he can score on the block and in the post, and he's playing a solid, number of minutes for them. He scored 15 in the game yesterday. That's enough to make a difference in the game. That's a really big scoring output for him. And it seems like Coach Bud has really looked into playing Pat Connaughton. He feels like he is good on both ends of the floor against Atlanta, even if his scoring punch isn't the biggest part of it. It feels like when he's out there, they're a fast, dynamic team, and they feel really good defensively and on the boards with Connaughton out there. He was a plus 25 yesterday.
Wow.
Which is pretty unheard of for a guy off the bench. And it's not like he came on and scored heaps of points. He only scored 5, but to play 32 minutes and be a part of a big run or a couple of big runs for them, that's pretty important. I think, Connaughton was a guy who at times they couldn't really trust against the Nets, but it feels like a lot of their bench guys are starting to get involved, and that spells some trouble for Atlanta and means good things for the Bucks if they're able to make it through to the finals. Yeah,
absolutely. And then of course the final thing that they're probably so happy about is that maybe the best thing about Drew Holiday is the fact that he isn't Eric Bledsoe. He doesn't even have to be amazing. It's just he's not Eric Bledsoe. So you spoke about his key scoring punch there to end that game 7 and really help the Bucks in Brooklyn. And he played great despite the loss in game 1. I think he had 33 and 10. And then game 2, when it was just a blowout, he was pretty crucial to not only, I think he got his own, he got 20 plus himself, but he obviously being the primary defender on Trae, forcing Trae Young to have 8 or 9 turnovers and making Trae have his by far worst game of the playoffs. So he didn't have a great game yesterday scoring the ball, but he still had 12 assists. So he's just
2 steals, 2 blocks. Even when his shot's not going down, he's finding a way to help you.
Yeah. So if we look ahead, I don't want to jump ahead to who their opponent might be, but if it is a team like Phoenix, then how important is Drew Holiday going to be throwing him? But if Booker, he'll probably start on Booker, but I'm sure if there's potential that CP started to get cooking and, find his mid-range, similar to that closeout game in Denver where he had, 37 or whatever, I'm sure they could easily go, throw Drew on CP for a few possessions, see if we can get away with putting Middleton or PJ Tucker on Devin Booker and see how that goes. So Milwaukee do have that flexibility as well, just looking ahead to the finals. But before we jump into that Western Conference final series, we should speak about some of the off-court news that's gone down. And there has been quite a bit, but of course, you with the jersey that you've got on, it's only right that we address your boys. So I don't know if he was brought in as GM, but the guy that's now effectively the new Donnie Nelson is Nico Harrison, who was the Nike. Was he the vice president of basketball for Nike or something like that? His role within, I'm not too sure the specifics. I don't know if you know it. No. And
I don't really know, but he was a big time executive, guy. history of making a lot of money for Nike.
Yeah, and then obviously the head coach who we potentially thought could be the guy, but it was obviously too early at the time, Jason Kidd. So I suppose the more important thing, which relates to you, is how do you feel about the Jason Kidd hire?
I feel awesome about it. Kidd's one of my favorite players all time. A guy who I even kind of built my own game around watching Jason Kidd, just how unselfish he is, and he plays that kind of style that mirrors a guy like Magic Johnson. He loves to be in transition. He's a point guard who really likes to ignite the team with his offense. But the way that he contributed to the Mavs championship, that was probably debatably the most important element of the whole team. Because we had Dirk and we had Terry. We know that they're absolutely elite scorers and going to be our 1-2 punch to try to win the championship. But the way that he, controlled the team, managed us offensively, and did an absolutely outrageous job trying to guard in the finals LeBron and D-Wade was, it was a magical run, and it just kind of furthered my love for Jason Kidd as a player. And one of the first jerseys I ever owned as well was his New Jersey Nets one. If it wasn't for Shaq and Kobe, he potentially would have had a ring or two before he got to Dallas.
Right.
But it's obvious that he, has a real spot in his heart for the Mavs. We were a team that drafted him and actually, traded him after 1 year for Steve Nash. And really interesting that Nash ended up, going back to the Suns ultimately, and Kidd ended up coming all the way back to us at Dallas and winning the championship. So in terms of a coaching hire, I actually was a defender of Kidd with his time at Milwaukee. They were obviously a young team who, with Giannis as their leader, had never really gone anywhere in the playoffs, and they hadn't really sniffed the playoffs since probably the Andrew Bogut area. But I thought he was really, really good there in his coaching job, and did a pretty admirable job with the Brooklyn Nets for a couple of seasons with a really throw it together kind of veteran squad with Paul Pierce and Kevin Garnett. I thought he did a good job there, and obviously he's well respected amongst the league, and people think that he can definitely still coach, because you don't get hired as the first or second assistant under the Lakers unless you know what you're doing. And Dame Lillard doesn't say, I want Jason Kidd to be my new coach, unless you know what you're talking about and you know how to manage these kind of players. So I think probably the key and what's different about Kidd as opposed to Carlisle is, he can have that relationship and have that common ground, in particular with a superstar like Luka. I think that's probably the most important and key element to this hire and the kind of direction that we want to go with the character of the team. I think I'm happy for Rick Carlisle that he's got a new job. He's gone back to Indiana to coach a pretty talented team. I know you and I both like some of the pieces that they've got there, and I think his coaching style may lend more towards a team like that, where they need a lot of direction and need a lot of, kind of a strong hand and someone who's really going to keep guys accountable and be aggressive in terms of, coaching them hard, like a guy like Popovich. But, with Kidd, I like the fit. I think him and Luka's relationship, together, Luka will be an extension of Kidd on the floor. They'll think of the game through a point guard's eyes. How are we getting guys shots? How are we getting into the flow of the game? How are we making sure that everyone eats at the same time? Making sure that we're prepared for that fourth quarter in the game where at clutch time, we want to be playing our best basketball and we want Luka to be playing at his best. And I think that's probably something that Carlisle struggled to get was elite fourth quarter and then clutch production from our team with Luka at the head. So, yeah, I love the hire. I don't really feel like it's, a massive amount of pressure for him, but we also have massive expectations. I think that this team, we should really be thinking that we have to get out of the first round of the playoffs next year because we're just too talented not to.
Yeah, and I think the thing that to mention that you sort of touched on as well was obviously people sort of are tainted, I suppose, by Jason Kidd's last head coaching job and sort of experience he had with the Bucks, as you say, how he sort of jumped ship from Brooklyn as he saw that was kind of going south and then potentially wasn't able to get the most out of that Bucks team. But as you say, they were young and, many people were pretty dubious about Kidd coming on board with Vogel there to coach the Lakers. And you don't know the impact that the Kidd had. I know Vogel got a lot of the credit for adjustments and how he helped bring that Lakers team together for their bubble championship and all the moving pieces they sort of have, and how, as much as it would probably seem like a dream role to be able to coach LeBron, it's potentially not as easy as people think. And, there's a lot of ego management that has to go on there.
Guys like Rondo as well, not easy to coach.
Yeah, not easy to coach. So, I'm sure Jason Kidd had a big role, as an assistant with the Lakers anyway. So it's been too long to be able to, put Jason Kidd in a certain paint him in a certain light. Sorry. So let's see how he goes. I agree with you. I think if one thing comes from it, he's probably going to get the best out of Luka for however long he's coaching. So I wonder what he thinks of the roster and the makeup of the team. We know after everything that's come out about the Mavs as of late that at the end of the day, Cuban's going to be the final say guy. So it's just a matter of, I'm sure he'll listen to everyone's opinion and what they think. So it'd be interesting to see how Jason Kidd sort of feels about that current makeup of the roster, because as you say, he's got the experience of that championship team, was it 2011? So, he would understand. I know the game's changed a lot, but he would understand what potentially key pieces should be, needs to be addressed in the off season in particular, because as you say, there's high expectations with this team as it is. So I'm looking forward to it. It's been a while.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's a good fit, because I think that Cuban will listen to Kidd. I feel like they've definitely got a relationship. Obviously, great success when he's run playing with us. So I think not only will they be on the same kind of page a little bit, it feels like we're hiring someone who's one of ours. Someone who understands the fabric of the organization, understands who he's got to listen to and who calls the shots. And that definitely is, to me, seems like a much easier transition than hiring someone from scratch who doesn't know anything about the club. So, I think we're in a good spot to improve immediately. And you're right, it definitely starts with the off season and what kind of adjustments we can make to the roster.
Yeah. And now the ripple effect, obviously, of you guys getting Kidd, it obviously means Portland didn't get Jason Kidd. Dame didn't get his guy. And there's been a lot of fallout from that over the past 24, 48 hours. How do you feel about all of that? So if you've been living under a rock, the Chris B. Haynes article came out yesterday. So he's obviously a guy that's had a very good relationship in terms of player to journo or player to media with Dame and that Portland team in general. So if it didn't specifically come from Dame, it definitely came from someone close to Dame, someone in his circle. So you can pretty safely assume that it's not too far off the mark, even if it's not 100% accurate, or didn't come from the horse's mouth. So it does seem like Lillard is, if you'd had to guess, leaning towards not wanting to be in Portland anymore. And so he would obviously, the next stage would be requesting a trade officially whenever that comes. So how do you assess that whole news? Because it's a little bit of a bombshell, considering we know he's been upset and not been happy with how the team's been going the last, we spoke about it in the pods, how they got knocked out in the first round, 4 out of the last 5 postseasons. So clearly something that must be frustrating for him. He's not getting any younger. So how do you make this whole Dame Lillard situation with Portland? I know it hits close to home with Pat obviously being diehard. So how do you feel about it all?
They're definitely in a tough situation. They kind of their first move. They definitely had to make a change. There was no doubt. When the season finished, they know that they needed to do something to change their approach to what they're doing, because when you're doing the same thing repeatedly, seasons again and again, falling short, there has to be an adjustment. There has to be a move. And when they pulled the trigger on Stotts, it kind of it put a lot of pressure on the rest of the organization, because he's such a strong figure in their club, and the way that he was an absolutely integral part in the success of the backcourt of Lillard and McCollum. He watched those guys develop into absolute all-star players, and he's definitely a part of the fabric of the team. And there's no doubt that would have unsettled Lillard. As much as potentially he might have thought that they could have had someone else better out there in the coaching ranks. I think still that would have definitely been unsettling for probably all the players in Portland. They're uncertain about their whole future with the team on the roster and with now who's going to coach them. So the stuff with Dame on social media, I feel like he's become such a big and popular guy on social media. You know, he's well liked all around the world. So I think whenever he comes out and mentions something directly about who he wants as coach, you know, it's an interesting thing. It's an interesting sign of obviously he clearly wants to be involved, and he clearly doesn't have much patience for winning. And I suppose you can't say without a doubt that you know that he wants to leave, or he's seriously thinking about going somewhere else. But you would never say never. You know, there's definitely a chance now. They brought in Chauncey Billups as the new coach, so that's really interesting. But we're starting. You know, I've always thought he could be a really good coaching candidate, but he's starting from scratch. You know, there's relationships with him and all the current players in the Portland roster. You know, they're building them from the start, and it almost feels like they're going to have to kind of reboot this team completely to make another run at potentially being perennial, you know, playoff contenders. So I wouldn't be shocked if Lillard goes, I'm not really keen to stick around for a couple of years and see how this works out. But on the other hand, you know, he signed up long-term to be with Portland on this humongous deal. And, you know, I reckon it was, you know, Portland had to sign him to that, and they should have. And he's basically given them value for that contract 100%. So it's just a matter of, you know, do they have enough wiggle room to make a change in their roster to catapult them into potentially being a contender sooner rather than later, because the clock, as you said, with Dame's age and the way that he's playing right now, the clock's ticking in terms of, you know, how long can he be a number one option on potentially a contending team?
It's a tough situation because we don't have any sample to work with Billups. Like people have spoken about. So his current gig is he's an assistant with Ty Lue, right? And he's only done one season with the Clippers. Is that right, or is that wrong?
Yeah, and he did some front office work, I believe, for the 2 seasons before that. So helping build the roster and such like that. So right. I'm sure he'd probably have a big say in what Portland are doing. I also know that you know, Portland have just transferred over ownership of the team between their owner passed away, I believe, and then one of the owner's siblings has taken over the team. So whether that sparks some changes in terms of how they're running stuff in the front office, that'd be interesting to see as well. But yeah, there's still a lot more work to do with this Portland situation. You know, to have Dame come out and say that he wants to leave would probably be the worst possible outcome for the team. And I don't think Lillard would do that unless something catastrophic happens that makes this team unplayable. You know, because where we are right now, they bring back the current roster they've got with no changes, and they bring in Chauncey Billups as the coach. You know, we're not talking about a contender there, but we're talking about definitely, you know, a fringe playoff team, a team with an excellent backcourt and a couple of really nice pieces. So without panicking too much, you know, I feel like there's still going to be a lot of changes to what's going on in Portland before the season starts.
Yeah, so he'll be 31 for the start of next season. So yeah, it just goes further to show that time is definitely against him and potentially the current group they have. So yeah, it's definitely now or never. I would expect that changes would be made. If it's not him, surely some other moves have to be made to really show that, no, we're still all in here to build around you. So whether that means sacrificing a guy like CJ McCollum to try and upgrade a certain spot, or, you know, using any of the other younger players they have to try and get some solid veterans that can be contributing pieces. I think they've got to look at all options and potentially mortgaging the future to make sure Dame's, you know, happy and excited about the prospects of going into this next season. It
should be mentioned, you know, that they kind of swung for the fences a bit, getting rid of a key young asset, you know, when they traded for Norman Powell. You know, when they did that deal with Toronto, they gave away potentially their nicest young player and their best trade piece, you know, so in Gary Trent Jr. And it's obviously worked out quite well for Toronto. You know, they've turned a kind of middle-aged veteran player in Powell into a young up-and-coming guy on a good contract in Gary Trent. And they've lucked out in the lottery and got themselves in the top 4. So, you know, on the flip side, Portland have to decide whether they want to sign Powell and, McCullum also becomes a key trade asset for them. So they've definitely got a lot of options. There's no doubt that there's going to be lots of interest for some of those players on Portland's roster throughout the league.
Yeah. So the other news, and this actually dropped this morning, so it was confirmed that our man Ben Simmons is not going to suit up for the Boomers.
Ooh.
So now that that's official, just in terms of from a defensive side of things, that obviously really hurts the Boomers, because we know just from that side of the ball, he can really impact it, despite, obviously his confidence not being there offensively. And obviously the mental side of it with the free throw shooting. And I'm still not sure of the FIBA rules, and in terms of, how it impacts a team if you can intentionally foul a guy, similar to how we see the, Hacker Simmons or, Capella or Hacker Shaq that they used to do back in the day. So I suppose the overall question is, now that it's official, Das, how do you feel about the Boomers' prospects for the Olympics?
Well, I think my initial feeling is I'm disappointed that Simmons couldn't join the team, because it definitely, puts a bit of a damper on what potentially more this team could become. But at the same time, I still feel confident that, we're as close as almost any team besides the US in terms of contending for a medal. I think I still feel strongly about the squad that we've got, and it seems like we're relatively injury free with the key players in our roster. We talk about the starting five that we went into the World Cup with. All those guys are fit and playing well, and probably our most important key offensive player is Mills, and I feel like he's probably been itching to play for the last month and a half, because it's been a long time since he hasn't played in the playoffs. So no, I feel good about the team, and I suppose I feel confident with Brian Goorjian that they'll put on a really strong performance and get some really good performances out of their key guys. Still interested to see exactly who they cut at the very end. So we're looking at a 16-man roster currently that'll be dwindled down to 12, and there's some really tough calls there with a lot of elite NBL players right on the fringe there of the team. They did lose a little bit of defensive prowess potentially with Isaac Humphries withdrawing his name because of injury. He's a Scots boy, so shout out to the Scots boys out there. But he led the NBL in blocks this year. He's definitely kind of a good mold for a potential third-string center for this team who can, really potentially get some experience to help the Boomers in the, Olympic campaign to come. And from listening to Brian Goorjian speak in interviews, he's really concerned about not only this Olympics, but the one coming up in 4 years' time. And he reckons he has a responsibility to make sure that we're in a good space for that Olympics as well, because his contract will have him coaching through to that time. And that kind of paves the way for a guy like Humphries. And I think that's kind of a sign that we might see Josh Giddey grab one of the final spots in this roster, which is really exciting. I think probably a guy that I have big question marks over what we're going to see is, what are we going to see from Dante Exum? I feel like we barely even got a taste of seeing him in the NBA this season, and it feels like we've barely seen him play for a few years now. This is a great opportunity for him to kind of show us what he's got and show us what he's worth, and whether he can really crack it back in the NBA post the Olympics. I just hope that he doesn't get injured as well. I think that's probably a pretty key thing for him. And I like to hear that Thibauld's going to play as well, potentially. So that I think he's probably a shoo-in if he wants to play.
That hasn't been confirmed. I thought it is. So he's still a maybe, is he?
I think he's still a maybe. Apparently he's flying to the camp right now. So on the way, hopefully he'll make it through to the Olympics.
Yeah. Okay. Well, yeah, if he wants to, then I'm pretty sure he's a lock, right? So it'd be interesting to see how he's utilized, because he's probably someone the likes of, Australian coaches in the past haven't had the luxury of using. Just he's ridiculous. Any Australian who hasn't seen him, you're in for a treat if he makes the Boomers, because it's not fair.
Something that might be interesting is, in the FIBA style, you are able to play zone. And I know that Brian Goorjian used a lot of zone with the Illawarra Hawks this year in the NBL, playing a kind of small, athletic, really long lineup. And Thibault had an extreme amount of success in his couple of years at college playing in the zone for Washington. He led the country in blocks and steals. He was an absolute freak. So I think if Thibault's in that team, the extended zone might be something that you'd see.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, well, that takes care of things for kind of the off-court news. Is there anything else you want to touch on off the court before jumping into this Clippers-Phoenix series? I guess the only other thing was what you mentioned before about the lottery, right? So obviously Detroit got the number one pick for them. Kind of makes it an interesting proposition for them if they end up taking Cade Cunningham, because now you can sort of build around him. And we saw great things from Sadiq Bey in his first year. We sort of liked the time we saw as well out of Isaiah Stewart as sort of the young pieces. Yeah. Didn't get to see too much of Killian Hayes. He dealt with an injury, so only played a little bit at the start and a little bit at the end. But I mean, not bad. How long's it been since Detroit have been good? So a long time, right?
Since Chauncey Billups, basically.
Probably since Chauncey Billups. So then, well, who else then probably got screwed by the lottery? There was a few teams. So I have the order here: Houston 2, Cleveland 3, Toronto 4, Orlando 5, OKC 6, Golden State 7.
Well, there was 3 teams that potentially their draft could have been completely blown up by the lottery, and only one of those teams got fully blown up. It was Minnesota. It's gone from bad to worse for them. We've thrown some real shade towards them throughout the pods this year, and it just kind of got slapped in the face again. The Warriors, because their pick didn't land in the top 4, Minnesota, it's ended up going to the Warriors, and the Warriors get a free pick at 7. And that was, for the listeners out there, that was part of the D'Angelo Russell trade. So not only does Wiggins come over and perform pretty well for them this season, for D'Angelo Russell, they also end up getting the 7th pick to go along with, I think, the 14th pick is their other one. Yep, is that right? So correct. They've got 2 in the top 14 for Golden State, and a lot of whispers around right now going in the media that potentially they would package those 2 picks and even potentially their first round pick last year, depending on what you think the value is in a trade for James Wiseman, and they reckon they could potentially get something of good value for those players to pair along with Steph and Draymond, and obviously Clay coming back at the start of next year. So I think the Warriors are definitely a big team to watch in the draft, because they do now have a lot of options after stealing this pick.
You'd be surprised if they made the selections, wouldn't you? Because who could they get at number 7 that could potentially help them right away, compared to being able to package that with 14, as you say, and a few of their young guys? It would just make sense that they try and get a veteran, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I think so. But I think at the same time, there's been a lot of talk about, the top 5 prospects in the draft, and kind of, there's also a couple of names out there. There's a young kid from Europe who's particularly interesting. I can't remember his name off the top of my head, but
this can be really for our draft pod in the off season.
Yeah, for sure. I think the Warriors are the type of team who've, been interested in looking after talent, and there's no doubt that, that they've been thinking about looking at guys for the whole off season, especially considering they're not playing in the playoffs right now. Their whole front office is looking at what guys in this draft could potentially be superstars. And, we've seen guys from picks below the lottery in the later first round to seriously come off as star players. That's happened. So I wouldn't write it off. It's still a pick they could potentially look at. The only problem with the Warriors is, they want to win right now. So it was tough for, Wiseman to basically have a whole year of just learning how to play with men and learning how to play at a high level. You hope that he can develop into a new player, but they really want to try to get someone who's ready to play right now and ready to maximize what they've got at the moment in Golden State.
Yeah, and I suppose then the question that sort of leads on to is given we're speaking about the Aussies, is where would Giddey land? Is it likely he's probably between that 10 to 20 range? I've seen a variety of spots that have him in different sort of positions, but it seems to be so if I just go and look at one right now, if they had Giddey 16th to OKC, and that's just a random one I just clicked on. So it seems to be in that 10 to 20 range. I wonder if the Olympics, if Giddey can play, will obviously help his stock considerably. In theory, it would, given that it's just more time to be able to see him from a scouting perspective. But yeah, there are some interesting teams there from that sort of 10 through to 20 range, though. There's obviously the team that already has an Aussie on there, which is, it's the Spurs that have Paddy Mills. They're sitting at 12. The Hornets at 11. Obviously Golden State, we've mentioned, probably wouldn't want him going to the Wizards. Memphis, Houston, New York, Atlanta. So I'm not sure. There's a couple of those in particular that I'd like to see him on. I'm not sure if OKC would be a good fit for him in particular, but definitely someone like the Spurs, even the Hornets could be quite exciting. Have him come off the bench or even look to start, another ball handler. 6'8", remember, his frame is pretty ridiculous. So I know did he just turn 19 or is he still 18? So he's very young anyway for considering the class that he's coming into. So, okay, so he is 18, turns 19 on the 10th of October. So by the time the season rolls around, he'll be freshly 19. So interesting to see where he goes. And that's a month away, isn't it? It's maybe less. So it'll be squeezed in somewhere, obviously with all the Olympics that are about to kick off. So there's just a lot to come.
Absolutely. No, he's a green prospect, a guy who's already shown how much he can improve over one NBL season, which is only, 18 games or 16 games I think he played. So really interested to see, I think he's definitely one of the top point guard prospects. If once you get through a few teams that are looking at point guards, he certainly becomes one of the best options going forward at that position in this draft. It's really exciting for Australian fans out there, and let's hope that he lands somewhere good.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so the final sort of thing we'll discuss is obviously the Western Conference final series. It's gone on. So before throwing it over to you, I would probably just say that it feels like forever since game one happened. And that was obviously the Devin Booker 40-point triple-double. And that was the first of his career. So he's another guy you can add to the list that have just really exploded in this postseason and really changed what we've thought about him in the past. Probably the most significant is him and Trae Young, right? So he's sort of further his credential as being a real, number one main guy and not just potentially looking for his own shot. And he can really run a team, and it's pretty impressive to see. And he's in there getting dirty. And obviously we saw what happened with game 2, and now he's got the face mask, and it's been really, really cool to watch. I think he's a guy that's obviously broken the Kardashian curse because his play is somehow elevated, going out with Kendall. So it's been good to see. And that probably, I guess, sums up for the most part game 1, because that feels like ages ago. I mean, I thought the Clippers actually played really well in both game 1 and 2. And despite a few things, you'd probably bring it down to free throw shooting in particular for game 2. Because I know Paul George missed, obviously, the 2 crucial free throws that would have given him the 3-point lead. But Paul George for the game was 5 of 10 from the line. So you can single out those 2. But for a guy that I think he's 80% plus, he's got to be for the regular season and probably his career, going 50% from the line in a one-possession game like that. Obviously, then the Valley-oop, as they've called it, with the Ayton tip dunk. Booker obviously breaking his nose. There's a lot to break down, but I suppose that's kind of my summary from the first 2 games. How do you sort of see things? And you're welcome to sort of extend off of that and speak about the series in general and the 2 games that just happened in LA with obviously CP coming back.
I think the first game, everything was against the Clippers. They have like a less than 2-day turnaround from.
You're right.
From an epic game 6 against Utah. And I think the reason that they put that game so early is just because the NBA wanted to have a game on the Sunday where they had a break. So they definitely got the short end of the stick in that game 1. And obviously, Booker was phenomenal, got them that win basically single-handedly with his playmaking and scoring. We did a good job of clamping him in game 2, even though he's able to get his 20. That's kind of a sign of a really star player. You know, even on a bad day when he's not shooting the ball, he can still get to the free throw line, find a way to put up that 20 points for the team. But I thought Beverly did a really good job. You know, it can be really frustrating to watch him, but those, you know, you need someone to go up and stand up to the best player in the team. You need someone to go up there and make things happen and get niggly and basically bring your team into the game with physicality and energy. And I thought Beverly did a really good job of that. I think in that second game, the Clippers, you know, they really missed a key opportunity to take the series control, you know, to lose both games in Phoenix without Chris Paul in the lineup. They really missed a golden opportunity. You know, they went down 2-0 in both series, you know, against Dallas and then against Utah. And for me, they really, really had to win that game too, because you just can't afford to do that again. Give the team a 2-0 lead, and with the prospect of Chris Paul coming back, I really thought their backs were up against the wall in game 3. But, you know, game 2 for me was extremely pivotal, not only because of, you know, the blown opportunity from the Clippers, but in particular what happened down the stretch. You know, I'm not sure if we touched about it before, but anyone who watched it or been reading the commentary about it, you know, it was an extremely slow game. The fourth quarter itself took, you know, I don't know, close to 50 minutes, and the final 5 minutes took about...
Did it take 50 minutes?
I think so, in real time. And the final 4 minutes took almost 20. So it's, you know, there's definitely some issues for the NBA to work through there, because you can't have the flow of the game be so interrupted by, you know, the constant need to get a lot of these decisions completely correct. And when it comes to, you know, video evidence, it's at times it can be not very conclusive. I know in particular that play with D-Book and Beverly, where he slapped it clearly out of Booker's hands, but there is obviously within a flash of an instant, the ball is tipped by Beverly next to the fingertip of Booker and then goes straight out. And anyone watching that in real time knows it's clearly off Beverly. You slow it down, change the angle into the slow-mo, it looks like it's off Booker. So that's a careful balancing act. The NBA needs to take a look at how they can try to get rid of that and continue the game to flow. But in terms of what cost the Clippers the game, I think you're right. You know, they did a lot of things right in this matchup. Jackson was great in game 2. They've got some really solid performances out of Zubac. They're able to play him a lot of minutes. And, you know, despite Ayton having a big impact, Zubac has really given them some points and some defense and some rebounding as well. I think, you know, we're not seeing, I think Terrence Mann's kind of coming down to earth a little bit while still playing quite well. He's certainly not giving them any kind of scoring punch like he did to knock out the Jazz. But Kennard's giving them a little something, and you know, Beverly's actually playing a pretty solid role. So when you talk about the free throws, I think that was the key thing that lost them the game. You know, George has been awesome, but now that he's become the number one option because of no Kawhi, he really has to work extremely hard for his shot. And if it's not going early in the game, or he's not able to get anything easy, then all of a sudden you see him pulling up for really difficult shots. And then when he's losing his legs because he's out of energy, it starts to look like it's a very tough ask for him. And it doesn't feel like there's any way for him to potentially overcome that and drop a big 30-point game and win it for him. The free throws, you know, you hate to play such a great game and then get to the free throw line and kind of spoil the game with a couple of missed free throws. But that just kind of proves how tough it is to win in this league and how tough it is to be that number one option and be that superstar closer. You know, there's plenty of players in the league who are absolute all-star studs who have had these kind of moments where it's difficult when the game's on the line and you're completely 100% out of gas to have the poise and knock down the 2 clutch free throws. You can definitely look at that and say that's probably the main reason that they weren't able to get the split. And that alley-oop to Ayton, the valley-oop, it's definitely going to be an iconic play for the series and a very defining moment in what happened. And I think if you look at the play just on itself, I think the Clippers, you know, made a big mistake and let in a way too easy bucket to win the game. You know, you hate to be critical when they play such a good performance, but you know, that one play really cost them the game.
Yeah, I look, it was a great screen, that's for sure. And then it's the guy we were just speaking about, Booker, obviously breaking his nose and coming right back in. And he's the one that sets the screen on big 7-footer Ivica Zubac to get his center Ayton the just enough space really to be able to get the dunk. And I
Really
know a
good
lot
pass from Crowder.
I know
Really
a lot
good
of I know a
pass,
lot
right
of
on the
people
money.
are speaking about, obviously that Crowder pass and the fact that they bring on Cousins and Cousins isn't even shading off the angle to the rim or make it difficult. He seems to be standing basically straight in line with Crowder, as if, Crowder was looking to get a pass into the wing or into the corner. So that was interesting. And it goes to further point of I know people have made it in the past that you don't like to bring off a guy off the bench who hasn't played all game for critical moments like that, even if they don't need to touch the ball. And it happened again in game 4 with Cousins in particular, if we want to get into that. But I think just overall, I've been super impressed with. I know he hasn't been able to do it necessarily down the stretch with those free throw shooting, but Paul George has played the most minutes out of anyone in the playoffs. They've obviously had a grueling two first rounds, obviously having to go small against Dallas and go small against Utah. So it's PG playing a lot of minutes in the defensive system or a style of play as well that's very demanding, not having a big there behind you for a lot of the time. So I think he's done pretty well. I think he's done a great job at quelling or calming down the hate and the criticism that comes his way. I think he's deserved to have a break this offseason from just the slander. I think he's done enough for that anyway. So I think Zubac has been great. I think the only other thing for me for the Clippers is, Jesus Christ, if Reggie Jackson's going to play like this, what's he going to get? Because he's a free agent this offseason. Is there a team out there that's going to give him $15 million a season? Maybe, given how he's played, it's totally flipped the switch for me. When I watch Reggie Jackson and he gets the ball in ISO, it all started to turn in that Dallas series. Was it game 3 or game 4 where he started off and he didn't miss a shot his first 8 or 9? Yeah. And it just, from then on, I swear it really flicked with him to suddenly go, oh shit, Reggie Jackson's got the ball. How much of a disaster is this going to be? Hopefully it's not too bad. To now Reggie Jackson having the ball and you're like, holy crap. I reckon he's going to score here. How does the defense stop him? He seems to have a variety of shots. His 3-pointer seems to be money more often than not. He's finishing well around the rim. In Utah, the series, he wasn't scared of Rudy Gobert. There's so many things that have just been really impressive about Reggie Jackson, and it's made you change how you think of him and how you view him. So, he's still only, 25, 26, or is he a little bit older? Maybe he's a bit older, but he can be a pretty solid contributor for a team that wants that kind of mix of scoring from that sort of combo guard position, because he's certainly shown in the playoffs that he can bring it. So that's probably been one of the main things to come from this Clippers postseason run.
He's definitely been incredibly admirable in basically the number 2 option for them offensively. And you're right that he's just been producing. I think we talk about his career and how he really made a name for himself as a 6-man for OKC. With Durant and Westbrook and in the post Durant era as well, he really established himself as a scoring guard who could really put the ball in the basket. And I suppose when he takes a big contract to go to a team like Detroit, and then all of a sudden you forget that he even is playing basketball because no one's watching them and they're not winning any games, and it's just hideous at times to watch. But obviously he's had a really good resurgence and quality pickup for the Clippers. They've made some shrewd pickups over this season and the last, guys who have really come off for them in this playoff run. Guys that they brought in on minimum contracts. I'm fairly certain that Reggie Jackson was a minimum contract, and same with Nick Batum, who's been absolutely critical for them in this particular playoff run. They're almost definitely overpaying Kennard, but he has definitely given them some key important moments in this playoffs as well, and showing that he can definitely score the ball at in high level in the playoffs. Terrence Mann, obviously, they've got, he's won the most good series by himself. What more could you ask out of that kind of pickup as well? So, and they were shrewd picking up Zubac in a trade as well with the Lakers, completely fleeced them to get him, and he's now playing 36 minutes in the conference finals, doing a big role for them. So you're right. A lot of credit goes to the Clippers, and you really gotta, it's tough. It's really tough if you're a fan of the Clippers because you're really proud of what they've done and the way that they've done it. But in particular, proud of Paul George. I thought that game 3, the way that they played as a team and kind of the way that he led them, he didn't feel fazed by anything that was happening on the other end for Phoenix. And I thought George did an exceptional job of, leading the team. And it felt like they were all in sync and playing at a high level. The confidence was just, you could feel it. It was flowing throughout the whole team, the confidence. And it was probably the best basketball I've seen the Clippers play, basically since they got George and Kawhi. It felt the most, sustainable and real when I watched them really dominate that game 3. But, it just hurts because if they had Kawhi in this lineup right now, I don't think there's anyone stopping them going all the way to the championship. I just don't know if even a team like Milwaukee, if they could withstand, what we know is such an elite player and an all-time great in Kawhi Leonard to go along with the way that the rest of this group is playing. It's just quite sad that they don't have him. But yeah, we would give lots of credit to the Clippers, and it's also a bit of a shame that Morris is injured because he was really starting to find some form there, in definitely in the Dallas series and the Jazz series. But if for everyone who watched game 4, that's when it feels like feels similar to the game 3 scenario in the Eastern Conference. Like it feels like we have a path now for how the series is going to end, because it felt like the Clippers completely kind of ran out of gas offensively. I still really enjoyed the way they were playing, but they just simply could not score against Phoenix in game 4. They end up with 80 points, in a 48-minute game. It's tough. You don't see that very often. No. And we mentioned how the series started real quick and they were probably underdone and very tired going into that game 1. But now the series has gone 4 games and they're still without their main man who can get a bucket without even trying in Kawhi Leonard. And now they've really, really got to shoot the 3 ball well to have any chance of scoring a big enough score to get the win against this Phoenix team. George goes 5 for 20 in game 4. Reggie Jackson puts up 24 shots. They really struggled to find offense, so Jackson was trying to make it go. They don't get anything out of Beverly or anything out of Morris, and Mann gave them a dozen off the bench, but they didn't get anything out of Batum or Kennard either. So they're really running out of offensive options, and I think that's probably what's going to cost them the series against Phoenix. Yeah.
Well, I just looked it up. Reggie Jackson's 31, so I'm an idiot. I can't believe I thought he was 25, 26. That's way off the mark.
That doesn't mean he doesn't have another couple of good years in.
No, so I think the best thing to come from this series or come from this postseason run for Reggie is he's going to get one last big deal potentially that'll see him out. So credit to him.
But do you take a big money deal and go to you probably end up, if you want to get a big deal, you're probably going to end up on one of those lottery teams. I think he'd be tempted to take a little bit less money and stay with a proper team that he's got good chemistry with. I think this fit at the Clippers is pretty good.
Yeah, that's true. And it's been spoken about how Paul George and Reggie Jackson apparently like best buddies. So there's another.
You can see the chemistry on the floor, the way they're playing right now. It's pretty special.
Yeah.
What did you think was the key to Phoenix getting that game 4 win and taking control of the series?
Look, probably free throws again, because the Clippers missed 11 free throws in that game and Phoenix missed 3. And so what did you said 84-80 was the final score of that game 4?
Yeah.
So, you miss 11 free throws. Paul George was 12 of 18 from the line in game 4 again. So 66%, I think that is. So for a guy that's 80% plus, I know he's carrying a lot. He's doing just about everything you can ask from this Clippers team. But yeah, I think both teams are really tired down the stretch. I wouldn't necessarily say it was just obviously just the Clippers. You saw Phoenix, Chris Paul shot 6 of 22. Like he couldn't make anything from the mid range. And how many shots overall in that game from both sides went in and out? How many were halfway down? I think Batum had one halfway down, a 3 that would have really helped. They were down 1. And Batum in and out in a 3. Batum also took a drive and missed sort of a layup.
Crowder couldn't buy one.
No one could buy a basket. And after the game, was actually a stat. The game 4, the Clippers were 0 of 12 on shots that would have given them the lead if they went in. So
momentum killers,
yeah. So definitely when they were coming hard, because he thought at halftime when Phoenix were only up 13 and the Clippers were shooting garbage, you were like, man, they should be up 25, not 13.
Yeah.
So when the Clippers started to work their way back and Reggie hit a big 3 from the wing and momentum started to definitely swing. And then we even forgot to mention Booker fouled out. So it's definitely another missed opportunity in that game 4 that the Clippers couldn't really get it done down the stretch, and all of their misses seemed to be short. And it would have really been nice to, obviously goes without saying, to have a Kawhi Leonard or just someone that went head down, drove straight to the rim, because it seemed like a lot of jumpers were being taken as opposed to trying to be assertive and get to the bucket. So that's a disappointing aspect, I think, and a missed opportunity. Again, if game 1 and game 2 wasn't a missed opportunity that you just spoke about, I think game 4 was definitely a missed opportunity, because it didn't seem like Phoenix were taking that. It's more like the Clippers lost that.
I think you're right, but yeah, you hit your wagon to being a jump shooting team. I think at some games in the playoffs, it literally can just come down to we didn't make enough shots tonight. And, that's probably why the Mavericks Clippers series went so long. They're both such heavy jump shooting teams. And obviously it was what enabled them to ultimately beat Utah in that series, was their ability to stretch the floor and jump shoot. So, you take the good with the bad. And I think on the flip side with Phoenix, how do they win this game when they're not doing it offensively, when they're not, shooting the ball at the clip that they want to be shooting, and Paul and Booker aren't, shooting the ball efficiently, neither of them over 37%. But I think the key is their style of play and their discipline in sticking to that style. It's clear that, they listen to Booker, and Booker is their leader. And then Booker is taking all of the experience and all of the knowledge from Chris Paul, and he's letting these guys know that, okay, this is the way we're doing it. And that filters down from the coach as well. They seem to all be on a really good string, and they're all connected in terms of exactly what they want to do. So when you talk about their half-court offense, very methodical, a lot of high pick and roll. If they don't have a nice option out of that, whether it's a Booker or Paul jump shot, or they get Ayton on the roll, they're kicking out the three-point shooters who are ready to shoot, or they're driving, putting their head on the basket. I think the key to, Phoenix's success in guarding the Clippers in this game was not only their methodical offense in terms of they know when their shots are going up, but they're extremely quick to get back in transition. When the Clippers were desperate to get a basket, they weren't able to break it up by just getting one in transition. They weren't able to just leak out and get an easy hoop. Phoenix completely made them grind it out, made them earn everything in the half court, made them earn everything from the 3-point line. And ultimately, I think the control of the game was won on Ayton. He grabs 22 big rebounds. That's a lot of possessions that just end up with Phoenix just because Ayton is active and getting to the rim. And I think, for him to be able to be out there for 41 minutes in a crucial game 4 of the conference finals, give you 8 of 14, I think he's shooting something like 70% from the field. And it's like an all-time number for guys in the playoffs at this level. So 19 points, 22 rebounds, and 4 big blocks. That's a really inspirational performance from him. And, I think when I touch on about how Phoenix have got a really kind of a well thought out offense and a very disciplined offense, if they know where their shots are coming from, they're getting back on defense, or Ayton's giving them extra possessions with his ability to get to the glass, use his size and his speed to get the ball. So, they're really making it difficult for Clippers to win any other way than knocking down a lot of outside shots.
Yeah, and it makes today really interesting, right? Because if you didn't see the news, no Ivica Zubac. So the Clippers are going to have to start small. And I think that helps them. I think potentially what they lose, obviously, with Zubac being able to compete with Ayton, they're just going to have to space the floor and just go back to what they were doing against Dallas and Utah. And that's clear
man game, baby.
It's got to be. So, there just has to be this relentless attack to get to the basket. And if Phoenix defense closes in, you kick it out to one of your shooters and you force potentially to some rotations out of guys that are not used to it defensively. And that's, look, as good as Ayton's been, I don't really think there's been too long of a stretch in this series where it's kind of been the Clippers 5 out. They might have had a few periods where they've had stretches, but definitely not, full game or half a game. It's been a little bit patchy with how they've done it. So now the fact they've got no other choice, it'll be interesting. I think the fact that they have to do that makes me think they could win this and force a game 6, because they're a good shooting team. They were the best 3-point shooting team in the regular season. We spoke about it, shooting over 40% from deep. So if there's a team to get hot and make 23s in a game or 20 plus threes, they're the team to do it, even without Kawhi.
For sure. I think it takes the pressure off them, because, okay, now we're definitely not expected to win this. This is do or die. This is swing for the fences or we're going home, and I love the way they played in game 3. They were awesome. They were even so connected in game 4. They held Phoenix to 84 points, and 9 times out of 10, that's getting you the dub.
Yeah.
Like, they've done a really good job on Booker. They really have. That he's not shooting anywhere close to his season percentage, around 50% from the field. He's nowhere near it. Paul, in those 2 games, he hasn't really looked like the Chris Paul of old. He hasn't been taking over the game with efficient scoring and dominating in double-digit assists. So I think they've done a really, really great job. It's just, it's definitely a great opportunity for them here to just go forward and really make Phoenix play their game and see if they can expose Ayton. You're right.
Yeah. Do you have it being wrapped up today? Because I've got it at least going another game, and I still like to think they could take it 7. I don't know. This team just doesn't give up, and you see the bounce back they had after game 2 and really blowing that, and you could easily feel like so deflated, and Paul George in particular. And as you said, in game 3, you really liked what you saw out of Paul George carrying and doing the heavy lifting, and 27, 15, and 8 was his stats. I know he had 6 turnovers in that game 3, but he still did. He was doing a lot. He was doing everything. Like, turnovers are going to happen.
That's more than that's more of an all-around game. That's an evolution of his game. That's different to the stat lines you were seeing when he was the potential MVP candidate. Like, it's not just scoring. He's understanding. Like, Tyler's obviously worked out that he can add more to the game rather than just being a big-time scorer, and that's not necessarily going to be what gets him the most out of him in a championship run. I think he's made a lot of improvements, and they're definitely going the right way with him. I think Phoenix will win this one, but I have a feeling this might be like an overtime game.
Okay.
And we might just see it we might see a defining, Chris Paul moment at the end of the game where he's just able to grab it by the haunches and take that victory. But yeah, I certainly don't think we're going to see a blowout. I think we're going to see all or nothing from the Clippers. Yeah. And you're right. If they do find some way to steal this and win this, then all the pressure goes right back on Phoenix, and they're getting home to that raucous crowd who's really getting behind them. So yeah, I feel like this series has got a lot more fire to it in this next game than what might happen on the Eastern Conference side.
Yeah. So that's where we'll probably leave things then, because Darth and I both have game 5. It's already started at the moment, 20 past 11. So we've got it recorded. So we'll go and tune into that. But we appreciate you guys for tuning in. I'm sure there'll be more off-season news to drop between now and when we do our next pod, but it's likely we'll be looking to do another pod to preview the finals and do a bit of a wrap-up potentially from the conference finals, if anything more any more dramas to go down. Who knows? Maybe Atlanta win game 4 and force at least 6 games. So there's plenty to still be played out, I think.
Well, someone's got to be crowned champion. We're talking about 4 teams that have never haven't done it in over a decade or 2. So yeah, very interesting stuff to keep rolling now.
Yeah. Okay. Speak to you soon, Das.
All right, guys, peace out.